The council had not just ruled the stars, it had become them. For more than 1,000 years, it had been the only power most species had ever known. Its symbol, a black sun crossed with 7 rings, was etched into coins, into transport hulls, into the mind of every child by the time they could speak. It meant order. It meant protection. It meant, this is how things are. And no one questioned how things were. There had been rebellions, yes, but only in the way that insects rebel against the boot that crushes them. They flared, they burned, they were extinguished, and the stories of them, if they were remembered at all, were taught as cautionary tales about arrogance. The council was not cruel by its own measure. It simply kept peace, preserved balance, maintained unity. Resistance was disorder. Resistance was ungrateful. Resistance was criminal. On the moon of Valorn IX, a military administrator gave a speech to schoolchildren, praising the discipline of the Valashi people for centuries of uninterrupted service to galactic peace. He meant slavery. He meant resource extraction quotas. He meant taking fathers to war and children to mines. But he said peace, and the children clapped because they had been taught that clapping was survival. On Larka Prime, a historian at a prestigious university revised a curriculum module titled Pre-Council Civilizations to remove references to human texts. Too inflammatory, she told herself. And besides, no one wants to read about Earth anymore. She flagged the last known copy of a human philosophical treatise for deletion, unaware that a maintenance worker on the night shift copied it to a data pad and walked it out in his lunchbox. On the trade port of Callier Reach, a customs inspector waved through a shipment of irrigation components, unaware that half the barrels contained disassembled pulse rifles. The bribe was modest. The look in the smuggler's eyes said only one thing: don't look too long. In the broadcast centers of the capital world Silere, the phrase ideological infection was used more and more often in internal memos. A minor council subcommittee proposed a review of all educational materials for unifying compliance. No one voted against it. No one had in decades. But in the deep systems, far from the core, in places where council patrols passed once every 6 months, things were beginning to shift. It started with silence. Not a gap in noise, but a change in tone. Fewer prayers to the council gods in public temples. Less praise sung to the 7, a lack of slogans on factory walls. The silence wasn't loud. It was surgical. A removal of rhythm. A breath held by billions. And then a whisper. A message spreading like static across secure channels, public terminals, buried deep in corrupted system files. One phrase. A voice, old and tired, speaking in rough galactic standard. It does not take a war. Just a moment. The voice did not name itself. Some believed it was human. Some claimed it was AI. Some swore it was a deepfake seeded by pirates or anarchists. But it spread anyway, because it didn't need proof. It didn't need to be true. It only needed to be heard. In the undercities of HFY, a group of sanitation engineers stopped repairing the surveillance drones. In the desert provinces of Karn Exo, supply runners met in abandoned fuel depots, trading ration packs for instruction manuals on signal disruption. In the drowned cities of Mariscalt, a group of exiled priests pulled ancient technology from flooded libraries and debated the ethics of uprising by candlelight. The council didn't notice. Or rather, it noticed what it was trained to see: data spikes, weapon caches, market fluctuations. These anomalies were reviewed, cataloged, flagged for observation. It saw only parts and not the pattern. 50 worlds, unconnected, spread across light years. No unified command, no shared language in some cases, but every one of them had something in common. The idea had taken root. It was not a plan. It was not even resistance. Not yet. It was a realization that the council was not a god. It was not invincible. It had been there for so long that most believed it always would be. But the message had cracked the frame. It does not take a war. Just a moment. Moments were beginning to form. A child on Hamel's edge broke her hand striking a council officer who tried to seize her brother for conscription. Her mother, arrested for sedition, was released the next day after the jail's automated doors malfunctioned for 17 seconds. The officer vanished. Official records said he never existed. On a freighter route near Verret's Belt, a convoy of food transports reported sensor failure, then returned a day later, emptied but intact. The crews refused to speak. The local governor was executed 3 days later by unknown assailants. No one claimed responsibility. At a mining colony on Resser 3, a group of laborers turned their back during a council anthem broadcast. The guards didn't respond. No one spoke of it. But later that night, every laborer found a copy of the message on their private comms, embedded in a maintenance code. It does not take a war, just a moment. The phrase became code, tattooed under arms, scratched into the inside of helmets, written in fading ink on warehouse doors. Not everyone understood it. Not everyone believed it. But it traveled. It moved. And then the countdowns began. Not publicly, not in announcements or on banners, in kitchens, in basements, in messages passed between lovers, siblings, teachers and students, smugglers and station clerks. They began at different numbers. Some started at 40, others at 12, others at 86. They were not synchronized. They were not coordinated. They were shared. A teacher on Julek 6 erased the last lesson of the semester from the chalk wall and wrote a single question. What happens after the council? A data clerk in a dry dock on Meridal left a message in the security logs. 3 days left. I love you, whatever comes next. A former soldier, exiled after speaking out against civilian abuses, pulled on her old armor and sent a single signal to 13 planets she had once served on. A stolen cargo shuttle changed course. A black market terminal flickered online. A child painted over a council mural with bright green shapes, and no one stopped them. The council still ruled. On paper, nothing had changed. But the moment had already begun. It began at 1401 Standard Galactic Time. 10 minutes later, the Council would lose half the galaxy. The first report came from the outer rim system of Ursatel. An orbital customs array had gone dark. A power failure, they said. A maintenance cycle gone wrong. The second alert arrived 2 minutes later from Ventali Station, where the governor's skiff was reported missing, and all security feeds were showing static. The administrator logged it, sighed, and poured another cup of Synthi. By minute 5, the Council's emergency monitoring nexus had flagged anomalies in 17 different sectors. By minute 6, that number was 32. Ships had stopped reporting in. Command terminals froze mid-transmission. Flags of unknown origin appeared on local planetary networks. In multiple languages, they bore the same word: Empirefall. At 1407, on the inner world of Cheddar Varn, thousands of civilians flooded the capital square. They didn't shout. They didn't chant. They simply stood shoulder to shoulder in silence. When council officers arrived to disperse them, they found the security drones disabled, their own communication signals jammed. Someone had locked the building's blast doors from the inside. At 1408, the city of Enlesia on Julek 6 lost all connection to orbital control. The council official in charge tried to call for assistance. Her screen lit up with a message in bold white text. You've ruled long enough. Then the power cut. Her guards had already left. At 1409, 48 of the council's central communication relays reported simultaneous logic errors in their redundancy subsystems. A virus, simple in structure but brutal in execution, cascaded through control towers and archive stations alike. Most believed the humans had built it. Some claimed it had no creator at all. Either way, no one could stop it. 10 minutes. That's all it took. By 1411, the council was no longer in control of its empire. On the slave moon of Gareth Nul, where mining was life and death came early, the children were the first to strike. Trained to sort ore from toxins by hand, they overwhelmed the guards with tools and fists. The signal had come in the night, smuggled through an old water filter console. Now, all at once. Go! The uprising was over in 12 minutes. The youngest survivor was 6. She carried a council officer's badge as a trophy. No one told her to put it down. On the pilgrimage world of Neros Kant, 6,000 monks emerged from the mountains and walked barefoot into the city, carrying only flags, each sewn from the robes of the fallen. The crowds that gathered expected prayer. They got a manifesto. It was spoken in calm, measured tones over every public channel. "We have worshipped peace. You mistook our silence for consent. We do not raise weapons, but today we raise the truth." In orbit above Kaliar Reach, 3 council warships turned their guns on each other after a mutiny erupted on the bridge of the Vigilant Ascendancy. Within 90 seconds, 3 different crews had declared their allegiance not to any rebel banner, but to the freedom of their own people. When questioned, the mutineers offered no explanation, only the same line heard across the stars. "It does not take a war. Just a moment." On Valorn the 9, a low-level customs agent finally opened a crate she had been paid not to inspect. Inside, weapons, medical supplies, and data drives, each tagged for a different rebel cell. She didn't know who had sent them. She didn't care anymore. Within the hour, she was directing traffic for resistance vehicles taking the spaceport. And still the council did not understand. Messages from the central hub world of SUBREDDIT were garbled and contradictory. Regional governors demanded aid. Fleet admirals reported silence from half their vessels. In the Supreme Chambers, the High Circle bickered over terminology. Was this terrorism? A false flag operation? A freak technological event? The idea that the people themselves were doing this, coordinating without coordination, rising without orders, was unthinkable. When the first planetary governor was executed live on public broadcast, the High Circle stopped bickering. They began to panic. The executions were not brutal. That made it worse. On the planet Wenet Daro, a human exile led a mixed group of farmers, clerics, and former soldiers into the capital's central plaza. The governor was taken alive. No ransom was demanded. No speech was made. The camera hovered close as the governor was given a choice: step down peacefully or be tried by the people. He laughed. Then he was shot once in the chest. He died in 20 seconds. The stream cut to black. That footage was rebroadcast across 43 systems within an hour. Council sensors couldn't keep up. Neither could their drones, nor their assassins. The galaxy had stopped watching them, and started watching each other. In the city of Maltrone, entire streets were repainted overnight. Graffiti and glowing ink stretched across civic buildings and monuments. One wall simply read, "You taught us to obey. You never taught us what to do if you fell." In underground channels, the word Empirefall was now trending above all others. No one could explain where it came from or who had started it. It didn't matter. It wasn't a name anymore. It was a diagnosis. The people did not wait for orders. They made their own. On the waterworld of Hentari, a council flagship docked for resupply. When it attempted to launch, its engines failed. The local dry dock workers had disassembled critical systems overnight, replaced them with fishing gear, and escaped into the shallows. They left behind a message scratched into the hangar floor. You do not sail the tides anymore. On one of the moons of Silience itself, the cradle of the council's founding species, a youth choir refused to sing the anthem. Their instructor stood with them. The broadcast went out across the system before it could be stopped. The council still had fleets, still had weapons, still had prisons and informants and money, but none of that mattered if no one followed their voice, and on that day no one did. Admirals argued. Generals threatened. Surveillance hubs went dark. Each faction believed another was to blame. Accusations flew. Internal purges began. Old species alliances fractured overnight. Paranoia bloomed like wildfire. On the 11th day after the uprisings began, the head of Central Records sent a single request to the High Circle. Do we know who started this? No one answered. The illusion of control was not shattered in battle. It was not destroyed in debate. It was simply absent. And in the absence of that control, voices rose. Songs of freedom, declarations of unity. public readings of once banned texts. The people did not speak with one voice. They shouted in 1,000, but they shouted together. In a back alley of a council capital, a child helped her father paint a wall. The words were messy, but they were legible. It does not take a war. Just a moment. Empirefall. At first, the council refused to acknowledge the collapse. They called it a temporary insurrection, a multi-sector disturbance, a techno-viral anomaly. The term Empirefall was officially banned from all internal communication logs. Using it publicly carried a charge of subversion, but that didn't stop it from spreading. It was scratched into prison walls, drawn into ship exhaust trails, whispered during trials. The council denied it, and in doing so, made it real. Not every world rebelled. Not every system turned. Many planets held to the council's authority, especially those close to the core, where fear still kept people docile and the rewards of compliance were tangible. The loyal worlds became fortresses, tightly patrolled, deeply censored, and increasingly paranoid. But even there, trust eroded. Council officers no longer slept in public barracks. They ate alone, weapons within arm's reach. Informants stopped reporting. Supply routes shortened. Minor species whose loyalty had always been conditional began holding back resources, unsure whether the next ship they loaded would be captured, or worse, defected. The Council fleet, though vast and fearsome, was splintering. Naval Command issued contradictory orders from disconnected centers of power. Some admirals launched unauthorized strikes against rebel-held worlds. Others simply vanished, taking their ships and crews to deep space colonies with no allegiance to anything but survival. Fleet morale collapsed. Command structures broke under their own weight. No one wanted to be the first to fire on civilians anymore, not when the outcome was being broadcast across a dozen sectors within minutes. No one wanted their name spoken in a rebel tribunal, or worse, remembered. On Valorn 9, the same moon that had once boasted perfect compliance, the local planetary governor held a press conference. He stood in front of a massive council banner flanked by armed guards and declared the uprising crushed. The footage showed him confident, hands clasped. The footage never aired. Before it could be transmitted, the rebel network jammed the signal and replaced it with a simple broadcast, a wide shot of the city center, filled not with soldiers, but with children, thousands of them sitting silently, each holding a candle. No weapons, no slogans, just light. When the governor saw it, he didn't finish his speech. He stepped off the podium and never appeared again. On the rim world of Hentari, the loyalist garrison commander refused to abandon her post, even as half her officers deserted. She ordered a full lockdown of the spaceport, barricaded the main data node, and cut communication with rebel forces entirely. It bought her 3 days. On the 4th, her own kitchen staff opened the gates. In the council chambers on Silare, debate devolved into chaos. The 7 voices of the inner circle shouted over one another, accusing each other of betrayal, of hesitation, of being infiltrated by human agents. 2 of them refused to return to the chambers after a verbal dispute turned violent. One vanished entirely. The council did not dissolve officially. It simply stopped meeting. Fear replaced policy. Species once considered cooperative began guarding their borders, refusing to send supplies or troops. Some cited local emergencies, others simply didn't respond. The language of unity cracked. The treaties frayed. Every loyalty had a limit, and the council had finally found it. Not through war, through fear. The real weapon of Empirefall was never the fleet, the guns, or the uprisings. It was the question now hanging in every corridor of every government building. What if we are not in control anymore? That question crept into every decision, into every delay, into every misstep. The council's orders slowed, became more cautious, more defensive. Garrison troops were pulled back to protect critical infrastructure. Patrol ships stopped responding to distress calls, fearing ambush. Governors offered local concessions, afraid to provoke their populations. The Empire still had weapons. It had armies. But no one wanted to be the last to die for a flag that no longer guaranteed survival. And so it ended. Not with a grand final battle, not with a treaty, not even with a broadcast. It simply stopped. A month after the first 10 minutes, the last planetary anthem was played on Larka Prime, once the jewel of the Council's educational sector. It was played for an empty courtyard. No one came. By then, the students were already being taught a new curriculum. Some loyalist worlds held out longer, isolated and increasingly irrelevant. Some rebel-held systems collapsed into their own infighting. Nothing was clean. Nothing was simple. The galaxy did not heal overnight. But it changed, and the council that had once claimed ownership of every star map was no longer feared. On one of those once loyal worlds, in a farming district far from any capital or garrison post, a classroom sat inside an old reconditioned warehouse. The walls were clean but scarred. A flag hung above the door, stitched from repurposed council uniforms, gray, red, green. On it was a single symbol, an open eye, watching. Inside, children listened as a teacher, an older woman with a weathered voice and deep laugh lines, closed her data pad and looked up from her desk. She had just finished recounting the events of the prior year, how their own city had been locked down, how the water had stopped, how their parents had stood with others and said no. A hand went up. A small girl, maybe 9, her skin dusted in the red pigment of the local clay. "What does it mean?" she asked. "Empirefall?" The teacher looked at her for a long moment, then smiled. Not the kind of smile reserved for comfort or approval, but the quiet, knowing kind. The one you wear when you've survived something that tried to erase you. "It means," she said, "the future is unwritten now." There was silence, the good kind, the kind that follows understanding. Outside, the wind kicked dust across the stones. A boy was climbing the flagpole, trying to fix the frayed corner of the stitched banner. A mechanic worked on the solar panels. The smell of stew drifted from an open window. No one saluted the flag. No one had to. The teacher dismissed the class. The children filed out into the warm afternoon light, their packs slung over one shoulder, their boots caked in red dust. One lingered, tracing the symbol on the flag with curious fingers. The open eye, the watchful gaze. A promise. Not that power would never rise again, but that someone would see it when it did. The child looked up, squinted into the sky, and smiled.